Hello again, all. I'll probably say this every time, but this is so far my least structured episode to date. I think the main reason for it at this point is I'm kind of reaching the end of my pre-school year ramblings. I know in previous episodes I've tried to quantify things that I've been doing in preparation for the school year, but I think more or less we're kind of reaching the end of that. I've sort of pretty much talked it to death at this point, I think. But there's still one more thing I want to go through, and then hopefully either through the rest of the summer or with whatever spare time I have, we'll maybe do some fun stuff. Who knows? But there's still one more thing I want to get out of the way, because I know there's a lot of people who still got some big questions about classics this year, and well, I would love to answer them if I knew those answers and those questions. I've got some questions of my own, and I think it's going to help everyone in the club get on the same page. So, using this platform, I'm going to put forward some ideas of trust. Um, if, if you trust me, that was so. So, what is it about trust that I actually want to talk about? The reason I bring it up is because one thing I've been ruminating a lot over is the one experience of any semblance of leadership that I've actually had in classics. My first year on exec, grade 10, was kind of eh. I don't think I'd stepped up all that too much. You could either say that's because most of the openings were kind of filled, or because I literally couldn't do like the most basic thing, which was just order the friggin' plaques from the trophy shop. To say what you want, my reputation was not as stellar as it has become over the course of the last 2 years. But regardless, this all came to a head last year as senior AC head during junior trivia, which I would probably say is the most official feeling event we had through the whole year. We had lots of events too, but the amount of preparation, logistical planning, and discussions behind it all was never as intense as it was in junior trivia. I think this kind of had its advantages and disadvantages. The advantage was it kind of showed us what pre pandemic mindsets of classics would look like in the pandemic environment. I think that event planning was probably closest that it ever had been to before. And I don't know how other people felt about it, but I feel like the consensus was it kind of came to mixed results. But the downside was the effect that it had on a lot of those organizers. Um, we definitely had some drop offs at the end of junior trivia. You could either argue that was because junior trivia was pretty, overbearing to a lot of new people uh, that were just showing up for the first time and seeing this club, because it wasn't super hardcore, but it was certainly more intense than you might expect in such a time, and that was because we took it super seriously, super logistically, which is fine, but it's a lot to get introduced to right away. The other reason I think it kind of is a little bit mixed is I think it also took a big toll on the organizers as well as the participants. I know for some people it wasn't all it was cracked out to be. It was certainly maybe not a stressful time. It was a little bit, but certainly a big area of focus and commitment. And then after that, things were completely different even still. So whether or not people were upset that other events didn't go the same as junior trivia, or just whether they thought it was all going to be like junior trivia and that scared them off, whatever you want to think it is. But it certainly kind of sticks out to me as a bit of a odd moment throughout last year. I think the main reason for that is because we were still working on transitioning into what that year of classics would look like. We sort of had some experiments with the online world with the year before, but that was because we were literally thrust in the final months and had to scramble to make do with what we had. With the start of junior trivia, it was our first chance to really plan things out, and that experience really showed us what that would look like. And you can argue about good or bad, but none of that is what I actually want to focus on. I know I've been railing about it for a while, but there is a point I want to get to, and that is the impact that it's had on those organizers, like I mentioned. Because I want people to think about what that actually meant for them in that moment. What did running junior trivia tell you uh, about classics running in general? I know it's a very specific question. Basically, the only people that can answer it are the people that were actually involved in junior trivia, which is not a lot, to be honest. But it certainly is an audience I want to reach out to in terms of thinking about this year, because I know people involved in that definitely have some experience with classics leadership, specifically with this, and I'm interested to hear some of those thoughts. Because for me, what it has told me is that classics alone is not extremely binding in terms of friendships and commitments and whatever bonds you want to call it. Because we certainly did have a lot of people leaving. Like, a lot of people did junior trivia and are like, well, okay, this was fun, which is fine. But it tells me that junior trivia alone was not enough to keep things going for the whole year. I feel like in a normal year, junior trivia is usually seen as sort of a bouncing off point. After the first movie night, you sort of consolidate people in using junior trivia and really formalize into the rest of the year classics. But in this case, I really feel like junior trivia was a big, sort of like a big old firework. Like as soon as it was over, it was over. And whatever remaining sparks we had in the terms of like grade 9 exec was pretty small compared to what you would normally expect to be a huge pool of people. And I think part of that is obviously pandemic stuff. Like there really wasn't that much to offer aside from junior trivia. And then the other reason is it's missing anything else. It was literally just junior trivia, which sounds a little bit weird putting it that way, but I really want you to think about it. With a normal junior trivia, sure, you've got the question answering. No duh, that's like the whole thing. But it was so much more than that, I feel like, at least in my experience. Being able to meet up with your friends, to study, everyone going down to one of the rooms in lunch, sitting with the buzzers, getting to be face to face with some of those big exec members. There was a lot that went into it, and in those rooms, in those sessions with the in person school, all of that was on display, and it really created a tighter sense of community. And I think it's that kept people in. I I know you've heard this all before. It's like been my whole thing as Classics president, which is Classics events are one thing, but the friendship is another. But I feel like this has really put out on full display what that actually means in practice. We've now had this event where the event is played out more or less as you'd expect. We had all the scheduled games, people showed up, they answered the questions, they left. That is like the minimum viable product. But the end result was extremely different and it set a course for an entirely different year. So it's left a bunch of us asking, what was different? What has changed? The event itself, like I said, is feels pretty stock standard despite all the different stuff. So because of that, it is those minute differences that have clearly changed the course of the year entirely. And I think that proves to me that those are some very, very significant factors in keeping people involved in classics. And that it's led me to the only reasonable conclusion I can come up with is classics alone is not enough to bring people together. They have to already have those connections, or at the very least, be able to make them through classics. That doesn't just go for the grade nines either. I think it's important that the grade nines meet each other during these events, get to connect with each other, get to connect with exec, because that's an important moment for them in getting to know the club. But I also think it's true for the organizers and the people already on exec. Because when I think about the people running junior trivia, like the ACHEAD team and the whole Discord server and all that, I think it really was a test on how committed we were to classics and to each other. Like it was easy for us to just say, all right, I'm done with this. I don't need this anymore, and just dip. And don't get me wrong, people did. Not naming names because honestly I don't blame them. Like I'm not going to hold that against them, but it makes you wonder how important these things really are to these people and what they're really in classics for. The reason I think junior trivia was successful for me is because I got to connect with some genuinely amazing people. being able to put the events together and answering it and having it go successfully was a big moment for me, especially as somebody who didn't really step up all that much before it. And I think it proved to them as well that I was capable and stuff like this. I'm sure that's a part of the reason that I'm here today in the position that I am, is not only the things that I learned there, but also the people I got to meet. Um, and because of that, I think this whole test of character thing was quintessential of what junior trivia used to be. It was sort of this chance to not only get to know other people, but also kind of yourself. Get to realize what kind of things are you hoping to get out of the classics program. And the fact that that's reached me as an organizer, not even as a person doing junior trivia, is pretty enlightening, I think. So when I look to the future, because now I've ruminated a bit on the past, what does this tell me about how we can proceed? Well, obviously, if we're back in school, then things are hunky dory. We can keep doing things the way we've been doing before, and hopefully the effects will be more or less the same. And who knows, maybe things will just sort of level themselves out. But like I've said before, the circumstances of which we are starting what could be a normal year are far from normal. So I don't think it's reasonable to be going in with that mindset. And I definitely want to be more prepared than just assuming, things will just be the same way they've always been. Because I think that seems just a bit naive, I think, at this point. I don't know. Maybe I'm being a little overly cautious or prematurely trying to optimize every single little detail, but I do think it's something worth considering and very important. And since we've got all this time in the summer, I'm already padding for these episodes already. Being able to think about stuff like this is pretty important, I think. So here is the big question that I think will sort of be worth considering in the future. And that is this trust that I've come to build up with all my fellow, past exec members through events. This camaraderie that really kept us together and kept junior trivia together. Did that actually come from classics, or does it already exist and classics just tests it or strengthens it? The reason I ask this is because it will determine whether or not people should be coming into classics with any kind of bonds or friendships, or if they can fully expect that they can make that kind of stuff in classics. Because I feel like for a lot of the people that didn't have close friends or any kind of connection to the exec or to any other classics member, like going into junior trivia and stuff, as soon as junior trivia is over, that's just it. It's gone. There's nothing left for them. And so for those people, classics didn't really exist to create any of that or support any of that, which is sort of on us because that wasn't really how we were organizing the event and it wasn't what we were really geared up to do. But it makes me wonder how much of a concern that's going to be down the line for new people. The reason that junior trivia went so well for people like me is because I already had some pretty good friends in classics that I care a great deal about. And doing it for myself, doing it for them, that was what pushed me through. And I think sometimes if I didn't have that, if I didn't have those people, would I have made it to the other side of that? Would I have grown at all as a person? Would that have led me to this position? And well, speculation is never going to be exactly accurate. It definitely makes me feel like that process would have been way harder. Because at that point, who am I even doing it for, if not myself? Nothing wrong with doing things for yourself, of course, but junior trivia is pretty taxing, and you have to be a little bit selfless once in a while just to be able to pull it off. It's a pretty big commitment, I will admit. Not to brag, of course. So if your answer to a question like this would be, I don't think that classics gave me any new friends or tested any of that. If your experience was you just kind of showed up and you were cool going along with everything, then there really isn't a whole lot of new maintenance we as a club would have to worry about. If that stuff's already in place, then it should survive through classics. But I think especially in the case of the nines, they need those connections first before we can throw anything crazy at them. Um, for some of the nines, it was fine. I think if you're enjoying junior trivia and you've got a good team, those things sort themselves out, no problem. And I think that's usually the case in a year. You sort of solidify meeting new people and getting in touch with all that with junior trivia. And that works fine most of the time, I think. In this year, things were kind of jumbled, just that little bit different. And like I said, that little difference was all it took to create a very, very different experience. If your answer then, of course, is, well, I came into the club with nothing. I really need those connections to keep me going, which I think I'd probably fall into that camp a little bit more, but it's a little hard to tell, of course. But if you're looking at that and go, yes, that is me, I come to this club to meet these new people and then hop into these new challenges with them, that order is extremely, extremely important. Um, if I had gone into junior trivia, organizing it rather, without really having any trust or any prior knowledge of the people I was working with, I cannot imagine getting through it or reasoning through it with them. The thing about the club is that you gotta have a lot of trust in the people around you to make things work. Uh, I'm the kind of person that has, sometimes difficulty with those levels of trusts. And if there's an option for me to just do things myself because I know that I can do them the way I want, then I probably would. It's a pretty bad mindset, and I'm super aware of it. So I definitely try to intentionally leave things up to other people, but it could be tricky. And that kind of mindset can be quite destructive even to yourself, just in terms of piling up too much work on yourself or too much pressure or responsibility. But can also be bad for other people because they're sitting on the sidelines going, what can I do? Like, why isn't this person giving me anything? Is it like they don't believe that I can do it? And sometimes for me that actually is the case. Uh, but most of the time it's just unnecessarily self doubt or just doubt in the system in general, which is a real shame because, like I said, classics very much operates on the system of having faith in other people to do the stuff you need them to do, and that really requires you to always be on the same page. So things like junior trivia went well for me because I had that group of friends. We were all on the same page, working towards this common goal. We had everything set up, and we just had to do it. To the degree to which we did it can be up for some debate, but I consider it to be a great success and a very great character building moment personally because it allowed me to put a lot of stuff on other people to do, and they did it. And this brings me to this year where we've got a whole bunch of exec, most of which I do know quite well and I do feel comfortable with. But now we've got a whole pileup of nines, of course, that have no prior experience, and even I'd argue some of the tens really haven't seen the full extent of what the club can do. So I think we've kind of got our work cut out for us a little bit in terms of really creating a good environment for that, because without it, anything that comes after is almost bound to only pull people away. It'll be very rare that that kind of stuff is going to pull people closer if they don't have a good net of support around them before it. So I guess that's sort of the big point of this episode. I don't really know how else to word it other than that, which is just if you want people to really get pulled in to the classics experience and the great journeys and tests of strength ahead, there has to be something else in it for them. And for me personally, and I think for most of the nines too, that something is going to be having good people around them that they can look to, that they can support, and that they can trust have their back as well. I think that's essential for any club, I think, to operate with any semblance of centralized control or trust. But I think here it's especially important in this age of isolation, as it were, with people that are really looking for some legitimate connections right now. So that's mostly it for me. Um, and as I said before, it's probably mostly it for my weird, awkward ruminations and introspections. I've kind of been over most stages of my classics experience. I basically talked about every year that I've had. So hopefully that gives you a better picture of me at least. And if not, I'm working on making myself more out there and open. So maybe I'll talk about more of that again. But I think by this point you've got a pretty good idea of me and what classics is to be and what I expect from it or what I expect to put into it. There isn't really much else that I want to talk about in that regard. So I don't know what that means for this podcast, but what I'm hoping for is that I could talk about some more specific and specialized things. Whether or not those episodes will be as long as this one or with the same kind of tone and pacing, I have no idea. This one, I literally just sat down and started talking, which is the first time I've ever done it. Usually I have, as I said before, notes that I prepare. But it's going to be whatever I want to talk about because, that's how this works. I hold the power, you see. So what that means, I don't know. But I'm hoping that whatever happens next is going to be real exciting. And I hope that it proves as well that classics can be a fun place of personal projects and feats of passion that really build up your character and test you into being a better person. So what that means for the future, I don't know. But I'm pretty excited. And I hope, whoever's listening, you guys are too. It's going to be a fun year, I think. Still got a couple episodes I can put out before the school year starts, but I hope you can tell by this that I've got some pretty big spirits and big expectations. I know it's going to be a lot of responsibility, but we're going to get through it. We will try. We'll keep on keeping on. And like I said, you get out of classics what you put in, and hopefully this proves that I've got things of which can be put in. And I hope that you guys can also say the same as the new generation, as it were. So how you have fun with that. Good luck.